little less than 1 year from today, you will go into the voting booth and you will select the next president of the United States of America.
I think elections are about the future. But how do you determine what will happen in the future? Well, you have to look to the record. You have to look to what we say in campaigns.
Egotism,
and what we have done during our
narcissism.
Islamofascism is real.
Their goal is to unite the world under a single jihadist caliphate.
Use fear and falsehood.
My view is we had a double Guantanamo.
What do you talk about when you have nothing to say?
This is insane.
Some of these people frighten me. They frighten me.
President Bush has talked about our staying in Iraq for 50 years.
Maybe 100.
The danger from Iran is grave.
Well, I'm not concerned about the voters.
It'll be a really nice fruitcake.
But I can't be president unless you choose me to be, and I hope you will.
Deficit financing, big government, more taxes, more bureaucracy, more regulations, more policing the world.
What are you guys talking about, you know?
So many people say, oh, Ron Paul, he's crazy. That guy's crazy. And it's because they don't understand. And the reason that they don't understand is because they're getting all their news from the TV.
I've been called everything. I've been called crazy. I've been called, when I got in a fight with the neocon guy, he said I'm a nut job. He said Ron Paul's a nut job. You know, I mean, Ron Paul has forgotten more about economics than this guy knows. I mean, you know, Ron Paul has forgotten more about the Constitution than this guy knows.
If what's presented to them as right is absolutely wrong, how do you know any better? Do you know what I mean? Everybody's too busy paying the bills, trying to put food on the table and support their families to be as big a political nut as I am, or some of you are, you know, to keep up with it. You're just regular working people, listen to talk radio some, maybe watch the news. If that's your worldview, if that's your perspective, how do you know any better?
There is no news anymore. As you know, news is gone in television. It's entertainment. It's all entertainment.
The media are almost incapable of reporting and even understanding the Constitution and the way that the Constitution is supposed to be respected.
If he can get in the debates, and if he can make a statement, and if he can really clearly enunciate his views, I think it's a story that deserves to be heard, and I think it's a story that deserves to be told.
And I was the one the most hesitant to get involved because time isn't right. Young people haven't heard about this. I'm not the right guy. We need more education because I believe that ideas move countries, individuals don't unless they're in the right place at the right time.
The big impact was when Ron Paul started to appear in the debates. There were 11 guys on the stage and 10 of them were saying the same thing, and Ron Paul was standing out.
We must win in Iraq.
We're going to have to engage in the Middle East.
This is a global effort we're going to have to lead.
We will do whatever is necessary.
The Iranians could grab the Shia South.
We have a new strategy.
Very confrontational and very aggressive.
There will be chaos
that will spread to the region and to the rest of the world.
They ultimately want to bring down the United States of America.
Congressman Paul, you voted against the war. Why are all your fellow Republicans up here wrong?
Ron Paul is not the snappiest speaker. He's not the soundbite guy. He can't just say something real quick.
I believe that when we overdo our military aggressiveness, what it does, it actually weakens our national defense. I mean, we stood up to the Soviets. They had 40,000 nuclear weapons. Now we're fretting day in and day night about third world countries that have no army, navy, or air force, and we're getting ready to go to war.
The things that he's talking about don't have soundbite answers. You have to explore things a little deeper to understand what he's talking about. So he's trying to give you some backstory when he's giving you his answer.
His style had rough edges, wasn't as polished. I knew a lot about that because I helped prepare a candidate, Herbert Walker Bush, for the debates. I was a shill, and so we would debate ad nauseum. So every line, every question was anticipated, and I could tell that what Ron Paul was saying was not for purposes of winning an election. They were gut reactions, truthful reactions to the issues.
At the core, the justification for his positions, the reason that he took the positions that he did was based on individual freedom.
A national tamper-proof ID card.
Yeah, I think that's critical.
They have to have a document.
A national special card.
Absolutely.
A tamper-proof card, a database, name, date, birth date, biographic information.
Dr. Paul.
I am absolutely opposed to a national ID card. This is a total contradiction of what a free society is all about. The purpose of government is to protect the secrecy and the privacy of all individuals, not the secrecy of government. We don't need a national ID card.
Ron Paul is completely uninterested in telling other people what to do or being told what to do. And there are very few people like that in politics anywhere ever. Because politics is, of course, about amassing the power in order to tell other people what to do. And Ron Paul rejects that.
I support federal funding.
That's a yes. Dr. Paul, yes or no on federal funding?
Programs like this are not authorized under the Constitution. The trouble with this...
He would take even issues that most people would consider minor, but vote on principle, even if it meant he was the only one voting against or for, whatever it was, usually against.
Would you work to phase out the IRS?
Immediately.
That's what they call a softball.
And you can only do that if you change our ideas about what the role of government ought to be.
I was just absolutely shocked that I was listening to a man who was speaking the truth about economics, speaking the truth about foreign policy, and I just said to myself, who is this guy? Where's he been? And what is he doing up on stage with all of these other Republican candidates?
He'd talk about central banking, which is off the table. I mean, it's not even an issue. No politician raises it. No presidential election has ever turned on it. It's just been quietly removed from the political conversation. He brings it back.
We live way beyond our means with a foreign policy we can't afford and an entitlement system that we have encouraged. We print money for it, the value of the money goes down, and poor people pay higher prices. That is a tax.
And I began to realize that this man is no joke. He is America's last true statesman, and he has actually been saying the same thing for the past 30 years about what our federal government needs to do to serve the people. That is, namely, follow the Constitution.
Suddenly, a lot of people who love the country and haven't voted precisely because they feel like it would be an insult to the great history of this country to vote for one or the other criminal, are so excited at the prospect that, wait a minute, maybe the country can be saved after all.
I think there is a market for, an appetite for his ideas. And his ideas are, pretty straightforward. If you sort of allow people to do what they want, they're going to make a ton of mistakes. They'll do more things right than wrong. But in either case, you don't really have a right to intervene.
This was the first election where you had somebody like Paul, where you could actually see a reflection of grassroots support, through the internet. The closest thing I can think of is Howard Dean in 2004, but that pales in comparison to what happened to Paul, especially with young people.
My name is Michael Nystrom. We are in my home here in Arlington, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, and I created and run a site called The Daily Paul.
We had to become our own media. That was a big part. I mean, the internet was a major driving force in spreading the word.
What was so wonderful about the Ron Paul campaign is the new free press was utilized, the internet. And that was wonderful because that's the next generation.
Going back to take a look at world headquarters of the Daily Paul. Here it is. Probably not what people imagine, but...
It's funny, you'll hear Limbaugh and all these guys talk about, well, some blogger wrote. Well, some blogger, who are you? I know you make $400 million a year, but what are your political credentials that your opinion is more important than some blogger?
This is just right off the kitchen. I like to say that I work from the kitchen table. This is the power of the internet, that a guy in his kitchen can have this kind of an impact.
The community of websites that was created by the Ron Paul movement is really quite phenomenal. It's like its own world.
The Ron Paul forums and the Daily Paul became to be the two prominent user communities for the Ron Paul movement.
I look at it as somewhat of a crucible, or it's a place where ideas get thrown in and there's lots of fire and sparks, and then something comes of it.
Me and Brian, we met at a meetup group, and we talked about ways that we could harness the internet.
Meetup is a website where people with like interests can form social organizations, groups, and use the internet as a basic tool for the structure of their organization, where they're going to go, when they're going to meet, and it's basically their communication hub.
We were, explosive growth for a long time. The number of people in meetup groups, I know McCain, he's got like 5 people. Blew away every other candidate by a mile.
4,000, 5,000, something like that, groups around the world. And not just in America, I mean around the world. They were in Belgium and Australia and just, they were everywhere.
Well, he is one of the 10 presidential candidates to face off in tonight's debate right here on Fox. But I got to tell you, I have never seen so many viewer emails urging us to get a candidate on our air as I have with this particular gentleman. How are you going to stand out tonight?
Well, I guess just telling the truth like I did last time, and we did very well.
In the debate, when you get 1 minute and 30 seconds, maybe for a rebuttal, and it might take you a sentence or two to really collect your thoughts, it's a bit challenging. So sometimes after I looked at it, I said, well, I did better than I thought I was going to be able to do.
It is the constitutional position. It is the advice of the founders to follow a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of entangling alliances. Be friends with countries. Negotiate and talk with them and trade with them.
They looked at that Republican stage that night and they're like, what is this guy saying? We've never heard anything like this. And what's better, it makes a lot of sense.
So there's a lot of merit to the advice of the founders and following the Constitution. And my argument is that we shouldn't go to war so carelessly. When we do, the wars don't end.
He was talking more about the things that really matter, not the war in Iraq, but should we be the policeman of the world? Should we be at war anywhere, and why, and when, and under what circumstances?
Congressman, you don't think that changed with the 9/11 attack, sir?
What changed?
The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years.
You know, if we misbehave around the world, you know, there are going to be people in the world who don't like the United States, period, end of story. I think that's just common sense. I think most kids know that at the kindergarten level.
It's very easy to be Rudy Giuliani and say, we got to get the terrorists, or, yeah, people will vote for you for that. It's very hard to get them to vote for somebody who actually makes them think or says, wait a minute, these slogans are fit for a 7-year-old.
Right now, we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
And I thought, what fun. How are they going to answer that? And it must have been embarrassing for the other candidates to have to sit there and hear this deep discussion and to know in their hearts the guy's absolutely right. But
are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. They have already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Ron Paul had the courage and integrity to call out the established fantasy that a lot of the neocon and establishment politicians have, which is that the United States, anything the United States does around the world is morally good because we, quote unquote, have the moral high ground.
Why are we being attacked? Well, you're not allowed to ask that question. We're being attacked because we're such wonderful people. Well, why else?
That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11. I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
And Dr. Paul wouldn't back down. Everyone in the audience wanted him to pander and say, oh yeah, no, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it this way. And he took that opportunity to educate the people.
Paul explained the concept of blowback to an audience, most of whom probably did not want to hear that, or more importantly, have never heard that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists.
And Paul pointed out that the primary cause of the threat of terrorism in the United States comes almost exclusively, not even sort of and piecemeal, but almost exclusively, because of our foreign intervention over there.
And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there.
Every single Republican on that stage wanted to get in their 2 cents about what Dr. Paul was talking about.
Can I have 30 seconds, please?
No, wait a second. We'll all get 30 seconds.
They are coming.
We all want 30 seconds to talk about this.
During the Republican primary, after each debate, Fox News would do this, the phone texting. Sean Hannity, text us right now, whatever the digits were for your candidate, In each Fox News poll, this was a poll conducted by Fox News, Ron Paul overwhelmingly won.
Here's a look at the early results of our text message poll. In first place, Ron Paul, surprisingly.
What does it say that he's doing so well in our text messaging among those watching Fox News?
To be honest,
right
says
absolutely nothing.
Maybe he's a little bit better organized and having his organizers do the necessary dialing.
On the one hand, you're taking it seriously enough to put it on, and then on the other hand, you're saying, no, don't pay attention to the person who's in first place.
Look, text polls are text polls. Right. It's like internet polls.
It's not even phone calls.
He did not
win that debate.
He did not win it.
No.
Why would he try to discredit their own poll? Doesn't make any sense.
In second place, Governor, you're in second place with 27%. Third place.
If Romney had won, you would have seen ticker tape parade stuff happen in the studio. They would have brought out, horses and Clydesdales and chariots.
Would have, talked for about 10 minutes about how great Romney is, and it makes sense that Romney won. Sean Hannity, more than anybody else on Fox, just without any subtlety, rips down anything that he disagrees with and doesn't even provide an excuse or an explanation.
If we feel strongly about it, why don't we declare?
If a woman is being raped next door, do we just do nothing there either?
This is just going to shake the establishment. They do not want this guy running for president.
I want to be president of the country, not president of the Republican
Party. You got to get the nomination first.
Yeah, but
this is an unusual figure, a liberty-minded, anti-war person. That this is not only not a contradiction in terms, it's the only sensible political philosophy there is.
I think Ron Paul basically, for me, it's done.
That was a fabulous boost for Ron Paul's campaign. I think that's when a lot of people woke up.
There's no question that Ron Paul struck a chord and it resonated with many people.
The Ron Paul moment, and that's exactly what that was.
And it was after that moment, after May, that traffic all over online really started to explode.
When Giuliani gave us a boost, then I realized that there's a lot of support out there.
Paul is truth! Paul is truth! Paul is truth!
What happened to your party?
They've lost their way.
It was the lead story in the next 24-hour news cycle, and of course I think that what they all figured was, well, that'll be the end of Ron's campaign.
Ron Paul is a no one.
Ron Paul really has no business being on stage.
And they have no idea what's going on. Why stomp out the grassroots candidate and only reward those with $100 million that get money from the special interest?
Republican presidential candidate Rudy Giuliani is being assigned some summer reading.
If there was a Guinness Book of Political Showmanship, Congressman Ron Paul would be in it today.
I'm giving Mr. Giuliani a reading assignment. We have Mr. Giuliani studying tonight. He's home reading all those books. And he's going to come back and he's going to apologize to me. And he's going to say, I'm sorry, Ron, I just didn't know. This is what I expect him to read before the next debate.
The titles include Dying to Win, which looks at the motives of suicide bombers, Blowback, which examines U.S. foreign policy.
Ron Paul was able to have a press conference afterwards showing that indeed the government reports themselves had been talking about the same things he had.
Paul brought along Michael Scheuer, the former head of the CIA's Osama bin Laden unit.
Our leaders tell us that the Muslims hate freedom and hate liberty and hate women in the workplace, and that's got nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with what we do in the Islamic world.
Jeremy in California, Giuliani's response to Paul and the subsequent applause by the audience just goes to prove how ignorant and arrogant we are here. That's a book list all Americans would be well served to read.
The reason this got so large so fast is because people did exactly what they wanted to express themselves to their peers, the people that mattered on their street corner in their neighborhood.
You know, traditionally in politics, and I was told early on when I first got in politics, you know, you develop your logo and you stay uniformed, and everybody does this, and you put this on every piece of literature, and your TV, your bumper stickers, everything else. And I kept remarking the characteristic of our campaign was there was no characteristic. You know, it was miscellaneous, spontaneous, homemade, and all shapes and sizes and colors. And it turned out that it was not uniform, and everybody knew it, but it didn't seem to hurt us.
The sign bombing culture that developed as a means of spreading awareness, and it was something that I did, you know, climbing up on overpasses, you know, putting up signs with zip ties.
These are all things that the grassroots thought of because their man wasn't getting the attention. So they basically had creative tantrums.
We started the Ron Paul Revolution sign production.
Okay, here we go.
We would do this every Friday. We have at least 1 to 3 stations across, just in Arizona, the Valley of the Sun here. We would have people on a Friday making 200-300 signs.
So that's another batch of another 42 more signs for tonight.
Young people are, it's just, they're natural born activists. It's in their blood. They're, you know, they're rebellious. They rebel against their parents and their teachers, and so it's in them, you know, not to be fearful and to stand up.
Don't just play by the rules. Think of ways to do unique things that break through.
It's not just what kind of places, it's like, can you attach it? If you can attach it, it went up.
Just walk down the street inconspicuously with the signs, you know, then you get somewhere, put up a sign, just keep on walking.
And all these young people that had never even, they go, you got a permit to put that sign up? Never even crossed their mind. Didn't even blaze over their cortex, brush it at all, that they were going to seek some kind of permission from the man to challenge the man.
Yeah, don't you like that little Spartan thing going on?
Yeah, looks just like him, man. Looks just like him.
Campaigns are very leery about sort of these volunteers. That is, they want people to come in and volunteer for the campaign. And they want you to do exactly what you're told. Come in and stuff envelopes or do this. What they don't want is anybody who will have any kind of loose connection with the campaign, but also some initiative who's sort of freelancing, you know, because those people can end up violating the law because they're not consulting the lawyers, and that gets the campaign in trouble. And so we've seen this sort of death of this type of spontaneous campaigning, and we've seen the centralization of campaigns. Campaigns become more and more centralized, especially presidential campaigns.
Many people got very passionate and gave their time or their money or just rose in a way above those regulations you were talking about and said, we're not going to do things the normal way.
And I think that's why the Ron Paul campaign was successful and why people have tried to imitate it haven't done very well, because they've tried to plan it, and you can't plan it. You have to inspire people and let them do what they do best.
I wrote about one of the first times people tried to mess with the Ron Paul movement. It was in Iowa, when there was a candidates forum being put on by the Iowans for Tax Reform. They didn't want to let Ron Paul participate.
Ron Paul's been long said to be the taxpayer's best friend. I don't think he's ever voted to increase taxes once, because he doesn't think there should be any, no income tax in particular.
You know, it would be like not inviting Batman to your convention against the Riddler. You know, how could you not invite Ron Paul to this? So the Ron Paul people decided they were going to have their own event in the next room. They ended up getting twice as many people at their event, which was much more interesting. There was no propaganda in it. It was all real information.
We now live in an age, now for a good many years, way too many years, that the federal government owns all our income and we're permitted to keep a certain percentage. That is the terrible notion of the personal income tax, which we should get rid of.
And here's Ron Paul, by the way. You know, he wants to abolish the IRS and replace it with nothing. Well, yeah, I can understand why you wouldn't want to have him at your candidates forum.
I've been involved in startups before. My background is starting a hospital software company, so you understand the power of organization. But what I hadn't really experienced in my life was the power of spontaneous order, where people see a shared vision. They come from all different political philosophies, all different life experiences, but there's a shared vision of what it means to be Americans and have a country that follows the rules. And things just started coming together.
As you can see, Mitt Romney's got buses coming in from the four corners of Iowa. They gave all their voters yellow shirts.
We were parked right at the entrance. We watched every one of Mitt Romney's buses pull up, and they'd have their little delegation out there to round these people up. They didn't let them talk to anybody. I mean, you couldn't even talk to them.
Restore our Constitution, Ron Paul.
Just herd them in there, and I guess they got them to vote, and then they would do whatever they wanted.
Looks like it's a carnival. Get the kids in so you get the parents in. One big carnival ride.
We haven't had the richest campaign, but we have had the hardest working, most enthusiastic, dedicated group of people who know and understand it's worth the effort.
I think all of us, including Dr. Paul himself, were blown away by the grassroots response.
I don't want to use the word out of control. It was unbelievable from then on. The kids would hear about the campaign on the internet and look at the videos and get their parents involved.
We have allowed our nation to be overtaxed and overregulated and overrun by bureaucrats. The founders would be ashamed of us for what we're putting up with.
This is of a piece of a sort of 230-year-old American tradition of, rugged individualism and independence and reverence for liberty, and those things are not as alive as they once were in American society, obviously, but they still exist, and I think Ron Paul speaks for a lot of people who still uphold those ideas.
The Constitution was written very precisely to restrain the power and force of government and to protect the liberties of each and every one of us.
I do think you should value people who speak from the heart and who tell the truth. And you should also value people who honor the vision of your founders and respect the most sublime constitution devised by human intelligence.
You're basically saying that we should take our marching orders from Al-Qaeda. If they want us off the Arabian Peninsula, we should leave?
No! I'm saying we should take our marching orders from our Constitution. That's where I take my marching orders, not from any enemy.
Over this way. They were downright rude to him during the debates. Some of these anchor guys would marginalize him and disrespect him there in front of national television audiences, and it was shameful.
Congressman Paul, yet another question about electability. Do you have any, sir?
Fox News' intent and purpose was to discredit Ron Paul because he represented what the Republican Party used to be, but better yet, what conservatism used to be.
So you're suggesting that I'm not electable and the Republicans don't want me because I'm a strict fiscal conservative, because I believe in civil liberties? Why should we not be defending civil liberties? And why should we not be talking about foreign policy that used to be the part of the Republican Party? Let me see if I get this right. We need to borrow $10 billion from China, and then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government, and then we go to war, we lose all these lives promoting democracy in Iraq. I mean, what's going on here?
Congressman, we are one nation. We can't be divided. We have to be one nation under God. That means if we make a mistake, we make it as a single country, the United States of America, not the divided states of America.
When we make a mistake, it is the obligation of the people through their representatives to correct the mistake, not to continue the mistake.
And that's what we do on the floor of the Senate?
No, we've dug a hole for ourselves and we've dug a hole for our party. We're losing elections and we're going down next year if we don't change it. And it has all to do with foreign policy, and we have to wake up to this fact.
Even if we lose elections, we should not lose our honor, and that is more important than the Republican Party.
We've lost over 5,000 Americans over there in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and plus the civilians killed. How many more do you want to lose? How long are you going to be there? How long? What do we have to pay to save face? That's all we're doing is saving face. It's time we came home.
Gentlemen, thank you.
I want to tell you that kind of isolationism, sir, is what caused World War II. We allowed Hitler to come to power with that kind of attitude of isolationism and appeasement. Okay. I just finished having Thanksgiving with the troops, and their message to you is, let us win. Let us win. That's what they want.
The presidential candidate that received more campaign contributions from active duty troops than all others put together, of course, is Ron Paul. And it really says a lot that the politically aware people in the military, those that are paying attention and engaged in the political process, are supporting someone who advocates an immediate withdrawal.
So what John is saying is just totally distorted. He doesn't even understand the difference between non-intervention and isolationism.
Ron Paul's non-interventionist view was, no, we shouldn't bomb these people. We shouldn't put sanctions on them. We should instead have free trade, cultural exchange. We should understand each other better. What in the world is isolationist about that? Trying to make this distinction with John McCain, seriously, I might as well try to explain the Copenhagen theory of quantum physics to him, so we'll leave him to his mistakes.
I think Congressman Paul should not be reading as many of Ahmadinejad's press releases.
It really bothered me how unfair they were with him. But then at the same time, it reminded me of that saying that Gandhi said, first they ignore you.
You say that you would eliminate the IRS, the CIA.
Then they laugh at you.
The Federal Reserve, the Department of Homeland Security.
Then they fight you.
Do you have proof of that? There's no proof. There's absolutely proof of it. It's been chronicled all.
And then you win.
First place with 35%, Ron Paul. Rooting for Giuliani came in second.
Oh, here we go again.
Driving Hannity
It's
crazy.
driving me
We're
crazy.
60.
I got very angry with you tonight.
Oh, my.
I know. We have some agreements
First time?
on
Is that first time ever?
No, not the first time ever.
You should be nice to your guests.
It's a shame that the Republican Party pushed Ron away. If they would have just grasped this message and said, yep, you're welcome, come on into the party, the Republican Party would have been huge. But instead, they shut it down.
Yeah, I didn't walk away. I guess I was, confident enough that they were wrong. This country is in a revolution. They're sick and tired of what they're getting, and I happen to be lucky enough to be part of it.
Ron Paul had a good day yesterday, a very good day.
Supporters dropped $4,380,000 in 24 hours.
And it's believed to be one of the biggest internet fundraising efforts by any candidate ever.
Ron Paul's fundraising was actually done by volunteers who simply stepped up to the plate and said, all right, everybody out there on the internet, we are going to give money on this particular day.
What if 100,000 of us donated $100 each on November 5th for a $10 million day?
His supporters raised the cash on November the 5th to commemorate Guy Fawkes. This guy was a British terrorist who tried to overthrow the government by blowing up Parliament and killing everybody in it.
Two important things can be thought of or represented by that date. One is, yes, Guy Fawkes, but the other is the movie V for Vendetta, which was a movie that touched on that historical date in order to create a new theme that was a reaction to the propaganda of the state, the police state, the spying, all these things that were going on.
I want everyone to remember why they need us.
And so it was no shock that they would try to focus on something that really wasn't the motivator for the day at all.
Were they contributing to your campaign, or was this all about Guy Fawkes Day?
Explain to me what those supporters who are drawn to you on that kind of anniversary are trying to say.
That's what they do. The media, I believe, intentionally, from the get-go, has marginalized his message, has tried to make it something that it isn't.
So that's what news has been reduced to, and it is very dishonest.
Is this the same kind of thing, or is this worse than what it was in the 60s with the radicals then?
Oh, I think it's much worse. Totally in bed with the Islamo-fascists and have turned against this country.
But it's out there, it goes, it's gone, it's believed, becomes part of the subconscious of the electorate and how they vote.
Our supporters, of course, are a lot different than others. Others are doing it for superficial reasons, but people who would join our campaign did it because they were philosophic people and they believed in something and they were motivated. So I think it represents a huge movement.
You hear grassroots all the time with Ron Paul's campaign. And one thing I learned, it's not a word. It's not like change. It's just not something you just hear. It's something you see.
Ron Paulers outnumbered and out-rallied all the other candidates' people combined. It blew me away, so I knew I was in the right camp.
And we had fun, because if you're not having fun, you're so doing it wrong.
So
Ron Paul, you know, he kind of strikes us the grandfatherly neighbor next door, and he's not the guy you think is going to lead a charismatic movement, you know.
Everything about the whole campaign was so innovative and different from what you're accustomed to seeing, and I think everybody's bewildered in the whole political arena right now, going, how did this happen? And how come I can't make this happen to my campaign?
Supporters of Ron Paul may dominate on the internet, but now they have their sights set on U.S. airspace.
I think the blimp has got to stand out in everybody's mind. I mean, that was just such an outrageous thing to do.
You know, you can ignore people on the ground holding signs. You can ignore people on the internet who debate passionately in forums. It's really hard to ignore a blimp.
The Skyship 600 is quite special. It's the largest blimp in the world. It's about 200 feet long, about 70 feet high, 65 feet wide, and I think it's probably the only time that an airship was used to promote a presidential candidate, in fact, or any politician for that matter.
Which I thought was a great PR stunt. I thought that was a great way to advertise Paul and Unique, and everybody was talking about it, Ron Paul supporters or not.
It took off December 12th, and it flew till pretty much the end of January.
We were very impressed at how quickly a seemingly random group of people could pull together this rather unusual, unique project.
Just great stuff. I mean, the imagination those people that like Ron Paul are showing it does a heart good. Somebody who's become jaded by the same old, same old.
We had a certain leisure to do something fun with the blimp, whereas, you know, traditional campaigning, you know, we send out brochures, we send out flyers, we have a bus. You know, traditional campaigns don't put blimps into the air.
I mean, you didn't see Obama or McCain having a blimp. That was unique to Ron Paul. What really works is when people are passionate about their work, when they're passionate about the campaign, and they step up to the plate and do what they think is right without having to take instruction from the higher-ups.
In my experience, I just saw too many people worrying about getting somebody else to do something and not enough people doing something themselves. And the next thing I knew, I was pedaling a bicycle across the country. I pedaled 3,700 miles from the Santa Monica Pier in California in Los Angeles to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C.
My whole life for 6, 7, 8 months was Ron Paul radio, get Ron Paul elected. That's the only reason why I was alive.
The newspaper ad in Iowa before the straw poll. I mean, that was probably the first big project that the grassroots put together where everybody just contributed from all over.
My husband went to work one morning and he come back and I'd already started painting on it and he said, "Oh my God, oh, babe." Then he helped me.
A group of political activists is spreading its own message, one step at a time. They are walking from Green Bay to Minneapolis.
And Jerry, their message is relatively simple.
We feel that the federal government is overstepping its bounds and treating the Constitution like a suggestion book and not like a legal contract.
And so I called up USA Today. I said, what does it cost to run a full-page ad? And they said, it's about $70,000 to run a full-page black and white ad. And I said, okay, I can do that. We'll do that. We probably had 2,000 editors of this ad. For the High Tide promo, somebody introduced the idea about making a video that would promote Ron Paul's message, kind of like a campaign video, but a little bit different style, something that's never been seen before, like a movie preview. People that saw the video that didn't know who Ron Paul was said, this is an amazing message. Who's the guy in the video? And that's one thing we're trying to show also, is that it has a timeless feel to it, that the message of freedom is an everlasting message. It can never get old, and it can never die.
One of the really appealing things about Ron Paul is that he understands the importance of history. He understands the importance of seeing where you're coming from and of not having the presumption in one generation to toss away the accumulated wisdom of ages.
Today, as we gather here in Faneuil Hall, we are going to set a record for fundraising. We are sending a message to the world that we won't be ignored. The establishment in their high-rise penthouse views laughs at you. They laugh at us, the Ron Paul rabble. But you know what? They're not laughing today.
revolution's in the air. The resistance is on. Take action right now, ladies and gentlemen. Call everybody you know.
We are blessed to have had Ron Paul stand for us all these long years. Now we are here today to stand for him.
So what do you think, man?
That was awesome.
Success? Success?
Absolutely. 5.5 million so far.
Man.
You set the record. In the history of American politics, nobody has ever raised more money on a single day than you.
Gosh.
And yet, this is happening without your campaign people coordinating. This is completely about grassroots, and it's completely about you just saying what you believe in.
There was a lot of interest building up to the first primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire, and there was so much interest online that nobody really knew how he was going to perform in the primaries.
We're about to go where no man has gone before. We don't do it because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. One small step for man, one giant leap for Ron Paul.
New Hampshire was just a blast. We put up so many signs in freezing cold weather. We were spray painting signs at 2 in the morning. The spray paint cans were freezing, so you'd have to take them inside after they had cooled down too much.
It's so cold out here. My hands are too numb to even know they're cold.
You know, we'd have the stuff inside, bring it outside, spray it real quick, go around. We had a circle. And we just kept, hundreds of signs that we did.
The primary hasn't happened yet. Nothing has been decided. The final push is underway to win the people of New Hampshire over.
Some reporters would ask me in the run-up to the presidential primary, whose hide were Ron Paul votes coming out of? And my usual answer was, no, Ron Paul's people are Ron Paul people.
I guess I did some sales on a highway once when it was shut down, but I've never done anything like this in a snowstorm. Ron Paul, he's trying to save the country, believes in this, what's it called? Constitution? That's what they call it, yeah. A lot of politicians aren't sure what that is, but...
Most successful, all successful campaigns in New Hampshire, especially in the presidential primary, have grassroots support. There are campaigns that try and do what I'd call Potemkin Village campaigns. It looks like there's grassroots support, but you look underneath it and it's all AstroTurf. There's nothing, there are no roots. Those ones get exposed and fail every time.
Please welcome Ron Paul. Now, I got to ask you, this seemed really unfair to me. You were excluded from the debate last night, and I'm trying to figure out why Fox News chose not to put you on.
One of the 5 men sitting at this table tonight will be the Republican presidential nominee.
It seems like you should be kicking somebody's ass right about now.
In 1964, my father was not even showing in the polls, but he went on to win the Republican primary. It's too early for you to decide on who's going to be the nominee, and you should allow all the voice to be heard, especially early in these races.
We don't let the media or anyone else pick who's a real legitimate candidate and a serious top-tier candidate and who is not. The voters make those decisions. And so we withdrew our sponsorship.
A lot of people put a ton into the campaign, and when they could see someone else just wipe out so much of the work because of their position in the media, they didn't like that. They didn't appreciate it.
The truth of the matter is we do enjoy the circus, and the fact that it was a very competitive primary on both sides of the ballot only made it a better show.
But everyone had a lot of hope. I know I had a lot of hope that he was really going to break through and come in first or second.
Your generation, the young people of this country, have awakened, and this is just going to be the beginning of something very, very big for this country.
I thought Ron Paul would probably be in the mix for that and could finish as high as 3rd in New Hampshire. He finished a couple of thousand votes out of that. And with a lot of support both in-state and with out-of-state people coming to New Hampshire to try and promote the message.
I was totally surprised by how the results went, but I mean, what can you do at this point besides not agree with it?
After Super Tuesday, which was in February, a lot of enthusiasm just got drained away.
Super Tuesday is almost completely in the books.
The polls get ready to close for Republicans.
Here we are. New Jersey, Republican primary, John McCain, we project the winner.
In New York, also John McCain.
In Connecticut, we project John McCain the winner there as well.
California is his.
McCain is garnering enough GOP support.
McCain with a large sweep of victories around the country.
You feel it in your heart. You know the guy is right. You want him to win. And the numbers don't show. You see the support. What do you do? I mean, of course you're going to get discouraged.
Though victory in the conventional political sense is not available in the presidential race, we must remember elections are short-term efforts. Revolutions are long-term projects.
I was disappointed when that letter went up on the website. I didn't want it to end.
I wanted Ron Paul to stay the course. It's not for me to say. I mean, who would want to be in a mess like that? Who would want to campaign the way that he had to campaign for as many months? It's a thankless task.
He was the vehicle by which we could express our dissent. Give a finger to the man all the way up to the end as far as we could take this.
But there's another thing that I think we ought to do. We ought to make a grand display. We ought to have a true march to show what our numbers are.
Ron Paul came out with his video, telling people that he wanted to have a march.
And they took it upon themselves to organize it. And they did it themselves, without the campaign, without Ron Paul. They just did it.
My theory has always been that if you ever can bring about revolutionary changes, two things would be required. The young people would have to be involved, you'd have to have music.
The freedom sound, it rings past politics and all its empty words.
That was like the thrill of a lifetime to be playing in front of the Capitol building with all those protesters. It felt like something out of the 60s or something that I'd only seen, previously.
The revolution is worldwide! It's always been worldwide! Would you listen to a poet or a prophet? Journal all this world's injustice or try and stop it. Can you feel the coming change? Though hell is here today, hope is on its way.
95, 100 degrees. It was unbelievably muggy and hot and miserable. But these people showed up, and the DC police told us that at the height of the march, there had to be 15,000 people there.
Of the tyrants and the good old boys.
As Iraq veterans against the war, we are resisting an occupation we once risked our lives for. We swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, but we found out the hard way that the greatest enemies of the Constitution are not to be found in the sands of some far-off land, but rather right here at home.
No more central planners, no more bailouts and billions for the bankers.
We're surrounded by the John McCains, the Bob Doles, Hillary Clintons, Barack Obamas, Chuck Schumers, all these interchangeable nobodies and liars and thieves and killers.
Even though people were upset about the government, upset about some of the things that are happening, it was so happy.
After the Revolution March, people started talking about the Rally for the Republic, and it was like the next big thing, and everybody was really excited about it. And I started getting all these emails like, hey, I'll see you in Minnesota, really looking forward to hearing you again.
St. Paul happens to be the evil twin this year.
The GOP convention was getting ready. Everything was kind of blocked off, so that's what made it such a ghost town.
And then you have the military standing on the roof of the building with their binoculars.
You have the National Police State in evidence at the Republican convention and at the Democratic convention. I mean, it's just with all of this security and this elevation of these people into some sort of American royalty.
What I understand is they spent $50 million on security. They built a cage around this building. They had riot cops, you know, they had their big billy clubs and their tie wraps for handcuffing people, and they just looked intimidating as hell.
You know, the Republican Party has all the money. They could spend tens of millions of dollars on their crummy convention. We got these huge billboards, you know, with Ron Paul quotations up on them, greeting the delegates as they get there. And I thought, man, that is such a gutsy, in-your-face thing. Things that are in your face, we are here, man. You know, we are not going away.
Ron Paul came on into the university area and met with us.
He led us for 2 miles through the streets, proving that you can lead the country at 73 years old.
It was just a joy to be able to walk with him, walk behind him, around him. He led us over to the Fed building, and we were just chanting and cheering the whole time.
We have just finished off leading a protest march to the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank, where Ron Paul gave a wonderful speech in front of this wonderful palace dedicated to fake money.
Certainly was an act of defiance to go ahead and choose an arena just on the opposite side of town from where the national convention is going on.
Even after the guy is not in the race anymore. I mean, again, who is doing this for any other candidate? Who would do it even if being paid to do it?
And this is real. This is where it's at. This is where this is where we take our country back.
We just arrived for the big event, for the Rally for the Republic. We're ready to go. Everybody's pumped, everybody's excited.
Ideas spread, they can't stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
It was the culmination of everything that his whole campaign stood for.
In a stadium like that, and to see all these people interested in something that I thought I was a loner, you know, almost in the ideas, and I'm sure Ron Paul felt the same way at one time.
In the past 18 months, it was discovered that the ideas of liberty and the revolution was alive and well, and we're celebrating it here tonight.
History constantly recycles and reinvents itself. Ron Paul touched a nerve, a deep nerve. Some people didn't even know that it was there till he touched it.
So once again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the trust that you have placed in me, but more so the trust that you have placed in the concept of our God-given rights to our life and our liberty. Thank you very much.
I almost feel as if he's saying, you know what, if people want what I'm offering, they'll make it happen. And I think that's why the grassroots just simply hasn't given up on him.
We want an America full of principled people. Not people who say one thing and do something else. Say anything to get elected, but who say what they mean what they say, and they live their lives by those principles. And that's why he can animate the grassroots.
So long term, it's changing people's hearts and minds, and that's where we've made the progress. But really what has happened is we have awakened a lot of people to look into our philosophy.
Don't give up. Don't retreat into cynicism. Even if we don't win, life is about fighting for something greater than yourself. It's a good thing to fight for what's right, and it's enjoyable to fight for what's right, and it's immensely satisfying to fight for what's right.
Let it not be said that we did nothing.
have no doubt that what was sparked by Ron Paul is not finished. It's not consummated. It's ongoing.
What we saw in 2007 and 2008 was the beginning of something that not only is still with us, and it endures. Why? Because it is about policy. It is about ideas.
It's time. I want my freedom back. Who else wants the freedom back?
The Federal Reserve, which many conservatives now recognize is the root of our financial problems, that was off the board. You couldn't talk about it a couple of years ago. Can we talk about it now? Why? Due in large part to Ron Paul, thanks to the fact that he was running for president. He was Tea Party before there was a Tea Party. And that was certainly the beginnings of what we recognize as the Tea Party today. It was the genesis, if you will. People who never cared about politics before got involved.
What brings me out here today is that people need to let this government know, both state and national, that we are fed up and we have had it.
If you voted for TARP, you're out. If you voted for the bailouts, you're out. If you supported Bush's spending, you're out. The Tea Party doesn't like that. And that's why a guy like Ron Paul becomes more popular, because his conscience and his record are clean.
But we have gone a long way from the dictates of the Constitution. That is not part of the American tradition.
Fox News is broadcasting it right now. Ron Paul won the straw poll against Mitt Romney, 31% to 22%.
When freedom dies in your heart, no speech, no emotion, not even a reaction to a tyrant can bring it back. But when freedom lives in your heart, no speech and no tyrant can take it away. God love you.
A show like Judge Andrew Napolitano's show Freedom Watch on Fox Business wouldn't have even been popular 2 or 3 years ago. The views that he expresses, accepted by mainstream conservative audiences, in a primetime slot on a major network like that, that's a revolution in and of itself.
We had a little election down in Kentucky.
We've come to take our government back.
Rand Paul, winning the election, becoming a senator, has a little different style than his dad. It's basically the same constitutional conservative message, but between the two, you're seeing a bigger, a bolder liberty movement. To see how much influence Ron Paul is having on Capitol Hill now versus the past decade, where he gets to question members of the Federal Reserve in front of everybody, gets to drag Austrian economists up there on Capitol Hill and question them. That's a revolution in and of itself. People are hearing things that are not Keynesian economics. They're hearing things that are the exact opposite of what they've always been told. Why does that happen? Why does Ron Paul have that chair? Because you cannot deny his influence, and even his harshest critics on the Republican side now have to admit it, accept it, and deal with it.
Put your hands together as I introduce the champion of the Constitution, Congressman Ron Paul.
I'm glad to see the revolution is continuing.
The winner of the straw poll, Congressman Ron Paul.
It's great that I'm able to announce once again that I am a candidate for the presidency in the Republican Party primary.
If we're really going to turn this country around, we have to have a revolution in our minds and our politics as much as anything else. More Americans than ever are not only beginning to see that, but are waking up to it and are excited about it. Things are trending our way.
This is our moment. This is Ron Paul's moment. And we're going to revolutionize this country.
trees and the talking birds smoke exotic leaves with adventurers. And as the wind it goes, so must you. If you've got to run, whoa, safe travels. See, so they tell me, maybe time you leave this old city, that the seasons change, they always do. I'll be waiting here to talk with you, and as the river runs, so must you. If you've got to run, whoa, safe travels. Oh, safe travels. Oh, safe travels. Yeah.